History remembers Sparta as a land of heroes, a civilization of discipline, honor, and warriors who chose death over surrender. But history rarely speaks of what happened after the battles ended, because when Sparta conquered a city, the men were not its most valuable prize. The smoke of Athens had barely faded when 32 noble women were marched across the mountains, wives of generals, daughters of commanders, mothers of future heirs. They were not executed. They were not enslaved in chains. They were processed. In silent courtyards, beneath the watch of Spartan wives, their bodies were examined, measured, categorized, not as humans, but as assets. Some were assigned to households to produce children for the state. Some were taken to temples where rituals blurred the line between worship and violation. And some disappeared into the shadows of the Crypteia, where young Spartan warriors trained themselves not just to kill, but to break human will. Among them stood one woman, Melina of Athens. 3 days earlier, she had been the wife of a respected strategist, mother of 2 sons, mistress of a noble household. Now she was property of Sparta. What followed was not random cruelty, but a system refined over centuries. A system where marriage meant duty, where childbirth meant inspection, where children born from captive wombs were taken, trained, and forged into the very warriors who had conquered their mothers. But within this machine of control, something unexpected happened. Attachment. A Spartan commander began to see not a resource, but a person. And in Sparta, where emotion was weakness and love was treason, that single fracture would set into motion a plan no captive had ever dared attempt. Because Melina would not fight Sparta with weapons. She would survive it. And sometimes, survival is the most dangerous rebellion in history.
The courtyard of broken names. They didn't kill the generals' wives, because death was too fast. Sparta had a cleaner punishment, one written in ledgers, not blood. And the worst part, it began with silence, not screaming. Melina still smells the city on her skin: smoke, wet ash, burned olive wood. 3 days since the walls of Crypteia fell, and her mouth still tastes like fire. She is 26, wife to Hippocrates, a strategist of Athens, once a woman whose name carried weight in courtyards and marketplaces. Now she stands barefoot in Sparta, wearing a chiton that is not hers, the cloth rough against her shoulders like borrowed shame. Around her are 31 other Athenian women wives, daughters, widows counted during the march-like inventory. They were not dragged here in chaos. They were transported with planning, separated with care, guarded with the calm of men who have done this before. The courtyard is not what she imagined. No filth, no drunken soldiers, no trophies nailed to walls. It is clean, ordered, almost ceremonial stone, swept smooth by centuries. Columns casting sharp shadows, torches fixed at equal distances, like a ruler measured the night. That is when the fear changes shape. In Athens, horror came with noise. Here, horror comes with procedure. The women of Sparta watch from the colonnade, strong-bodied, upright, unreadable. Their faces hold neither pity nor rage. They look the way traders look at a horse before purchase, not cruel, not kind, just assessing. A man approaches, older, hard-muscled, his face carved by scars that seem older than his voice. A crimson cloak marks him as a full Spartan citizen, one of the equals. He does not introduce himself because authority in Sparta does not need names. He stops at a measured distance and speaks in a harsh Greek that sounds stripped down, sharpened, made for commands. You are no longer Athenians, he says, no longer wives, no longer mothers. Athens is behind you. Whatever you were is finished. One of the women beside Melina begins to shake, but Melina does not reach out. She has already learned that movement invites attention, and attention in Sparta is never gentle. Then comes the sentence that feels like a door locking. You are property of the Lacedaemonian state, the man continues, but not slaves. He says it as if he's explaining a tool. Slaves are for labor. You have different value. The word value lands cold, like metal. He lists their futures the way a clerk lists destinations, some to households, some to temples, some to training, some to breeding. He does not raise his voice. He does not threaten. That is what makes it worse. Threats are emotional. This is administrative. Spartan women emerge from the shadows and begin to divide them into groups. No shouting, no discussion, only hands on shoulders and short directions. Melina is led through a doorway into a small room with a stone table, a basin, and an older woman holding a wax tablet. The examination is clinical and humiliating, less violence than erasure. Teeth checked, hips measured, scars noted, questions asked without apologies, cycles, pregnancies, the health of children. Melina answers, because resistance does not break a machine. It only makes it grind louder. The older woman makes marks on the tablet like tally scratches on a prison wall, then gestures toward another door. Behind it, muffled sobbing leaks through stone. Night deepens, but Sparta does not sleep the way other cities sleep. Even the silence feels supervised. Melina lies on a hard pallet, hearing footsteps in corridors, hearing the low murmur of Spartan women speaking like attendants at a ritual. She remembers the stories Athenians whispered Sparta as a place of disciplined heroes, Sparta as a city of noble warriors. Those stories now feel like a mask placed over a skull. The truth, she realizes, is not merely cruelty. Cruelty can be random. This is a system designed to convert defeat into usefulness. Before dawn, a younger woman enters, athletic, calm eyes like cut stone. "I am Gorgo," she says, not as greeting, but as function. "I am here to explain your assignment." Melina sits up, forcing her spine straight even as her stomach turns. "Household," Gorgo says, after a glance at the tablet's marks. "Secondary wife." The phrase is said like a category on a shelf. Your body will serve Sparta. Your children will belong to Sparta. And if you refuse, Gorgo pauses just long enough for fear to bloom. There are other uses, training uses. Melina wants to ask what that means, but the question dies in her throat. She already knows Sparta's favorite weapon, the unknown, sharpened into certainty. Gorgo steps closer, lowering her voice not in kindness, but in precision. "Survive," she says. That is the only power you have left." And as the first light of morning bleeds into the courtyard, Melina understands the real punishment is not death. It is being kept alive long enough to be remade into something Sparta can own. Outside, the torches are still burning. The courtyard is waiting, and somewhere beyond those columns, the men who decide fates are opening the ledgers.
A system that replaced humanity, Sparta did not break women with chains. It broke them with systems. Every captured wife was measured, recorded, and reassigned like land after conquest. In this city, even wombs were counted as military resources. Morning in Sparta arrives without warmth. The sun rises over stone, not life, and Melina feels its light like exposure rather than comfort. She and the other Athenian women are led back into the courtyard, now arranged differently, order imposed overnight. Lines marked on the flagstones guide where they must stand. No one explains why. No one needs to. Sparta runs on obedience before understanding. The Spartan women move among them holding wax tablets, murmuring to one another in low, efficient tones, comparing notes the way merchants inspect shipments. It is then Melina realizes the examinations were not individual violations, they were data collection. A table is placed at the far end of the courtyard, and beside it stand two physicians and an Ephors representative. The Ephors administrators of Spartan law do not appear in armor. They wear plain cloaks, which somehow makes them more frightening. Warriors kill in battle. Ephors decide who is worth killing, who is worth using. One by one, the Athenian women are called forward. Ages are confirmed. Fertility histories reviewed. Physical assessments cross-checked. When a woman protests, the physician simply repeats the question until she answers. Emotion has no effect here. Only information matters. Melina watches as categories begin forming. Younger women are moved to the left. Mothers of healthy sons are marked with additional symbols. Women past childbearing years are separated entirely, led toward a different corridor guarded by priestesses rather than soldiers. The shift is subtle, but chilling utility determines destiny. A woman beside Melina whispers, "Where are they taking them?" Melina does not answer. She suspects temple assignment means religious servitude of a kind Athens would call desecration rather than worship. When her name is called, Melina steps forward with controlled breath. The physician recognizes her from the night before. He reviews the tablet. 2 sons, both healthy? He asks. Yes. He nods and adds another mark. The F4's representative studies her in silence, then asks a single question. How long since your last birth? 5 years. Another mark. No judgment. No reaction. Only classification. She is dismissed with a gesture, sent to stand among women labeled suitable for household integration. The phrase is spoken aloud: household integration, as if they are being installed into existing Spartan structures, like replacement beams in a damaged roof. As the process continues, Melina begins noticing patterns. Spartan households lacking heirs receive priority. Warriors who lost wives in childbirth are assigned foreign women. Older citizens seeking additional offspring file petitions. It is organized reproduction, state-managed breeding designed to solve demographic decline. She remembers Athenian philosophers speaking of Sparta's strength, its discipline, its unity. None spoke of this, the machinery beneath the legend, where conquered women became solutions to population shortages. By midday, assignments are announced. Not publicly, but individually, whispered by attendants who escort each woman away the moment her fate is sealed. Some cry out, some collapse. Most walk in stunned silence. Melina is taken not to a barracks, not to a slave quarter, but to a bath chamber where Spartan women scrub her skin with oil and ash. The cleansing is not kindness. It is preparation. Foreign scent removed. Identity stripped. Repackaged for integration into Spartan domestic order. While she is dressed in fresh garments, still simple, still foreign, Gorgo returns. You have been placed in the household of Cleomenes, she says. Citizen, veteran, no heirs. The words feel transactional, like reading livestock lineage. You will produce children. They will belong to the state. If strong, they enter the agoge. If weak, she does not finish. She does not need to. Sparta's cliffs are famous enough. Melina's mind is not rage. Rage is wasted energy here. Instead, something colder forms awareness. This is not chaos. This is policy refined over generations. Sparta did not invent brutality. It engineered it. Every conquest feeds this system. Every defeated city supplies bodies to maintain Spartan bloodlines without diluting citizen status. It is eugenics disguised as civic duty. Before she is led away, Melina glances once more at the courtyard. The remaining women stand waiting under the same sun, still unassigned, still categorized only by potential use. She wonders which fate is worse, being chosen or not being chosen at all. As she is escorted through narrow stone corridors toward her new household, one realization settles heavily inside her. Sparta did not conquer her to destroy her life. Sparta conquered her to repurpose it. And somewhere in the city, records are already being updated, her name erased, replaced with a function.
The Crypteia's shadow hunger. Not all captured wives were sent to households. Some were taken where no records were kept. No survivors spoke. In Sparta, the darkest training did not happen on battlefields. It happened in silence, far from witnesses. The corridor that leads away from the main courtyard is colder than the rest of Sparta, cut deeper into stone, where torchlight struggles to reach the ceiling. Melina walks under guard, escorted toward Cleomenes' household, but the route passes an iron-bound gate she had not seen before. It stands recessed into the wall, half hidden, guarded not by regular soldiers but by younger men, wearing darker cloaks, their crimson dyed almost black in the dim light. They do not stand at ease. They stand alert, predatory, as if guarding something alive. From behind the gate comes a sound that does not belong in disciplined Sparta. Not shouting, not battle cries. Something thinner. Human voices restrained. Not loud enough to draw attention, but too desperate to hide completely. Melina steps slow without permission. One of the guards notices and grips her arm not violently, but firmly enough to remind her she is cargo, not a visitor. "Do not look," he says flatly. That alone makes her look harder. The gate opens briefly as another woman is pushed inside. She is older than Melina, perhaps past her prime by Spartan standards, her wrists bound not for restraint, but for control. Her eyes meet Melina's for a fraction of a second. I have already emptied of hope, already aware of what waits beyond the threshold. Then the gate closes, swallowing her into darkness. Later, inside Cleomenes's household, Melina asks one of the servant women in a whisper. The servant hesitates, glances toward the doorway, then answers in an even quieter voice. The Crypteia. The word sits heavy. Melina knows the name. All Greeks know it, the secret arm of Sparta, the hidden society of young warriors trained to hunt helots in the night. But she had never heard of women being taken there. They train there, the servant continues. Interrogation, control, pain tolerance. They practice on those the state does not need for breeding. Melina feels her stomach tighten. Practice, she repeats. The servant nods. They are taught how to break resistance. And women are used to measure how long resistance lasts. That night, sleep does not come easily. Through the household walls, Sparta remains quiet as always. But Melina's mind fills the silence with imagined sounds, the muffled cries behind the iron gate, the lessons taught without witnesses. She remembers Gorgo's words. There are other uses. Now she understands what that meant. Household assignment was not merciate, was selection. She had been spared experimental brutality only because her body was deemed reproductively valuable. Days pass, and fragments of truth assemble themselves through whispers, overheard conversations, and the careful listening that survival requires. The Crypteia recruits young Spartans around age 18 boys, hardened by 11 years of agoged training, but not yet fully tested. They are sent into darkness to complete their education, learning not just how to kill, but how to dominate psychologically. Helter, their primary targets, but captured foreigners, especially women, serve another function. They become tools for teaching emotional detachment, interrogation endurance, and the mechanics of fear. Melina learns that some women survive Crypteia training. Survival can still be called living. Those who do are rarely returned to households. Most are reassigned to temples or labor compounds, considered too damaged for reproductive use. Others die quietly, their deaths unrecorded because the system does not consider them losses. One afternoon, as Melina carries water through a rear courtyard, she sees them again. Crypteia, trainees passing through the street, younger than she expected, faces smooth, almost boyish, but their eyes carry something older than age. They walk in silence, daggers at their sides, moving like wolves that have learned discipline, but not compassion. One of them glances toward her not with desire, not with cruelty, but with evaluation, the same way physicians had assessed her body. In that moment, she understands the full scale of Sparta's design. The Crypteia are not merely soldiers. They are products of a system that removes hesitation before it can form. If a young Spartan can learn to break a human being in training, then breaking enemies in war becomes effortless. Psychological warfare begins here in hidden chambers, with captives who have no voice left to protest history's narrative. That night, Melina kneels beside the small oil lamp in her chamber, staring at the flame as if answers might live in fire. She realizes survival in Sparta is not about avoiding death, it is about remaining useful enough to avoid the shadows. Her assignment to Cleomenes's household is not safety. It is temporary classification. If she fails to conceive, if her value drops, the gate she passed today could reopen for her. And in Sparta, once you enter the Crypteia's chambers, you do not return the same person. If you return at all,
Marriage without consent in Sparta. Marriage was not built on love, but on necessity. A captured wife was not chosen. She was assigned. And inside Spartan homes, duty replaced humanity. But sometimes, even systems fail to control the heart. Melina is brought to Cleomenes's household at first light, escorted not as a guest, but as a delivery. The house stands modest by Athenian standards, stone walls bare of decoration, furniture built for endurance rather than comfort, a courtyard where everything feels measured, functional, stripped of softness. Sparta wastes nothing, not even space. Cleomenes waits there, already informed, already prepared, studying her arrival the way a commander studies new equipment issued for campaign use. He is younger than she expected, perhaps mid-30s, but his body carries the hardened geometry of Spartan training, lean muscle forged through decades of discipline. His face is neither cruel nor kind, simply controlled. When he looks at her, it is not with lust, nor even curiosity, but assessment. She recognizes the gaze instantly, the same one used by physicians, by ephors, by Crypteia trainees. She is not a woman to him. She is a solution. You understand your position, he says. It is not a question. Melina nods once. Words feel unnecessary in Sparta. Everything important has already been decided elsewhere. Cleomenes gestures for the household attendants to leave them. When they are alone, he speaks again, voice low but not unkind. You were wife to Hippocrates, strategos of Athens. The mention of her husband hits harder than insult. He fought well, Cleomenes continues. I faced his cavalry once. He was competent. Melina realizes this is Spartan respect, their version of courtesy, measured only through war. He studied Spartan tactics, she replies carefully. He believed understanding an enemy was the first step to defeating them. Something flickers briefly in Cleomenes' eyes. Not emotion exactly, but interest. Then you understand why you are here, he says. Sparta does not waste resources. The household women prepare her chamber, not lavish, but sufficient. A real bed, clean coverings. Food brought without humiliation. Compared to the Crypteia shadows she now fears, it feels almost merciful, but she knows better. Comfort here is maintenance, not kindness. Healthy bodies produce stronger children. That night, when Cleomenes enters her chamber, the silence between them carries more weight than words. There is no ritual, no affection, no attempt at romance. What happens is direct, efficient, almost clinical state-mandated reproduction, performed with the same discipline Spartans apply to military drills. He does not linger afterward. He does not speak. He returns to his quarters as if completing an assigned duty. Melina lies awake long after, staring at the ceiling beams, realizing the true horror is not violence, it is the absence of emotional acknowledgement. Even cruelty would have recognized her humanity. This system does not bother. Days turn into weeks, and patterns form. Cleomenes spends most hours in communal barracks, as Spartan law requires, but he returns each afternoon briefly. At first their conversations are minimal household needs, logistical matters, but gradually they lengthen. He speaks of campaigns, of training regimens, of Sparta's endless readiness for war. Melina listens carefully, offering small responses that signal intelligence without defiance. One evening, he mentions the agoge not proudly, but factually describing boys trained to endure hunger, pain, cold. She asks questions, not challenging, only curious. He answers more than necessary. Another evening, he speaks of his first wife, Lampeto, who died in childbirth. His voice does not break. Spartans do not break, but it loses its edge. Melina recognizes loneliness hiding beneath discipline. This is the first crack she sees in Sparta's armor, not in walls, not in laws, but in people. Spartans are trained to suppress attachment, but suppression is not erasure. Something human remains buried beneath conditioning. Cleomenes begins staying longer in her chamber after duty is complete, speaking in the darkness where no one can observe him. He talks about doubts he would never voice among peers, about casualties, about demographic decline, about how Sparta conquers faster than it can replenish. Melina realizes something critical then. Survival here will not come from resistance, but from adaptation. If she becomes more than a womb in his eyes, if she becomes necessary to his thoughts, her position strengthens. Protection in Sparta does not come from law. It comes from usefulness, and emotional usefulness may be the rarest commodity in a society that forbids feeling. One night, As he prepares to leave, she touches his arm lightly, a gesture natural in Athens, but foreign here. He freezes, not in anger, but in unfamiliarity. Touch without dominance confuses Spartan instinct. He does not pull away. Instead, he sits back down. They talk longer than ever before. Outside, Sparta remains unchanged, efficient, silent, merciless. But inside this single household, something unexpected has begun forming, something Sparta never accounted for. And if discovered, attachment between captor and captive would not be seen as weakness. It would be seen as corruption. Children of conquest in Sparta, birth was not joy. It was inspection. A child's first breath did not guarantee life-only evaluation. For captive wives, motherhood was not love. It was the moment the state claimed what their bodies created. Winter passes slowly in Sparta, marked not by festivals or music, but by training drills echoing through stone streets. By the third month of her assignment, Melina begins to notice changes within her body, subtle at first, then undeniable. Her cycles stop. Fatigue settles into her bones. She says nothing immediately, because in Sparta, pregnancy is not private news, it is state property information. When she finally reports to the household physician, the examination is swift, impersonal. The verdict is delivered without ceremony. You are with child. The words do not bring relief. They bring calculation. Her survival value has increased, but so has the pressure. Cleomenes receives the news with visible restraint, though she senses relief behind his discipline. An heir secures his household standing. A productive captive secures her continued protection. It is not celebration that fills the house, it is administrative satisfaction. Her pregnancy is monitored carefully. Diet adjusted. Activity regulated but never fully restricted. Spartan doctrine believes strong movement produces strong offspring. Midwives visit regularly, not to comfort her, but to ensure the fetus develops within acceptable parameters. Melina begins to understand that even before birth, the child is being evaluated. When labor finally comes, it is long but controlled. Spartan midwives are efficient, experienced, unflinching. They do not offer encouragement in words Athenians would recognize. They offer instruction. Breathe, push, endure. Pain is expected. Silence is respected. When the child is delivered, a boy, there is no immediate celebration. He is cleaned, wrapped, and taken from her arms before she can fully process his weight. 3 days later, the inspection occurs. It happens in a chamber colder than the courtyard, attended by elders from the council. Melina is allowed to stand in the room, but not to hold her son. Cleomenes stands beside her, posture rigid, face unreadable. The infant is placed on a stone table. The elders examine him the way physicians examine livestock, limbs straightened, joints flexed, chest pressed to test lung strength. He cries loudly, instinctively resisting the intrusion, but no one responds to his distress. Melina's hands tremble at her sides, though she forces stillness. She knows the stories. If deemed weak, if any deformity is detected, the child will be taken to Apothetae, the chasm where unfit infants are discarded. Exposure, they call it. Mercy through abandonment. The elders confer quietly. Time stretches unbearably. Finally, the oldest among them turns. Acceptable, he says. The child will be registered. The relief that floods Melina is so intense it almost weakens her knees. Her son will live. But the relief is incomplete, because survival here is not freedom. It is recruitment. They name him Pleisthenes, a name of Spartan lineage rather than Athenian memory. Already, his identity is being rewritten. She is permitted to nurse him, to hold him, to care for him, but only temporarily. She learns quickly that Spartan mothers are guardians, not owners. At age 7, he will be taken to the agoge, stripped from her arms, just as she was stripped from Athens. As months pass, she pours into him the affection Sparta does not allow between adults. She whispers Athenian lullabies, traces his features, memorizes the warmth of his skin. She knows these memories will be all she keeps once the state claims him fully. Cleomenes visits more frequently during this time, watching the child with something close to pride, yet even his pride is structured. He speaks of future training, future campaigns, future honor. One evening, as Pleisthenes sleeps, Melina asks quietly, "Do you ever think what he might have been if born elsewhere?" Cleomenes does not answer immediately. His gaze lingers on the child. "He is Spartan," he says finally. That is what matters. But his voice lacks certainty. Melina senses it, then the second crack forming. The first was attachment to her. The second is attachment to the child. Sparta teaches fathers distance, but blood complicates doctrine. The more time Cleomenes spends watching his son, the more human hesitation seeps beneath discipline. Yet Sparta's shadow never retreats fully. Rumors reach the household through servants and visitors' stories of other captive women whose infants were rejected, of mothers forced to watch as midwives carried silent bundles toward the cliffs. The message is clear. Motherhood offers temporary elevation, not permanent safety. Her value now depends on producing more children, preferably sons. As Pleisthenes grows, Melina realizes the deeper horror. Her child will not merely live under Spartan rule. He will become Spartan rule. One day he will wear crimson, carry a spear, march into foreign cities, and perhaps stand over another captive woman exactly as his father once stood over her. That night, holding her sleeping son close, Melina confronts a truth more terrifying than death or violation. Sparta had not only taken her body, it had claimed her bloodline, and was reshaping it into the very weapon that conquered her. Escape from the machine Sparta could conquer cities, but it could not conquer choice. The system that turned humans into weapons had one flaw: emotion. And when love entered Sparta's machinery, it began to break. Years pass in disciplined silence, measured not in seasons, but in transitions, pregnancies, inspections, training milestones. Melina bears more children for Cleomenes, each birth strengthening her position within the household, each infant tightening the chain that binds her to Sparta. Outwardly, she becomes what the system designed her to be: productive, cooperative, valuable. But inwardly, something else grows alongside survival: calculation. Her first son enters the agoge at 7, taken from her arms in a ceremony devoid of tenderness. She does not cry. Spartan women watch closely during these separations, measuring emotional weakness. Instead, she memorizes his face as he walks away, small shoulders already trying to imitate warrior posture. That night, Cleomenes remains in her chamber longer than usual, silent, restless. The absence affects him more than doctrine allows. She sees it clearly now. His conditioning is eroding. Their conversations deepen over the years. No longer confined to tactics or household logistics, they speak of philosophy, governance, the future of Sparta itself. Cleomenes begins voicing doubts he once buried about population decline, about endless wars draining citizen numbers, about reliance on captive women to sustain bloodlines. He does not question the system openly, but he acknowledges its cost. Melina listens carefully, guiding without confronting. She has learned Sparta cannot be challenged directly, but it can be redirected through personal loyalty. The more he speaks, the more he reveals a private self-Sparta never fully erased. Attachment to her, attachment to their children. Fear not of death, but of leaving them unprotected within the machinery he once served without hesitation. Then the shadow returns. Lysandros, the Crypteia captain, who once petitioned for her, rises in influence. His reputation grows darker with rank. He has not forgotten her. Servants whisper that he has renewed interest now that she has proven fertile. A woman of productive resilience, they call her a prize worth acquiring once household protections weaken. Melina understands immediately. Pregnancy shielded her before, but protection fades once children are born. Cleomenes learns of the renewed petition before it reaches the ephors. This time, his reaction is not procedural, it is personal. He confronts the council directly, arguing her continued value to his household, invoking lineage, productivity, civic contribution. His objection succeeds temporarily, but it marks him. Fellow Spartans begin questioning his attachment to a foreign woman. Loyalty is being weighed. That night, he speaks to her in a voice stripped of discipline. "I cannot protect you forever," he admits. "If I fall in battle, you will be reassigned. Lysandros will have you." The fear in his words is not for himself, it is for her. Melina realizes the moment has arrived. Survival through adaptation is no longer enough. The system is closing again. She reveals the plan she has been building silently for years. Spartan embassies travel beyond Greece to Persia, Egypt, distant territories where Spartan authority weakens. Diplomats sometimes remain abroad for months. If one defected during mission, the scandal would be political, not immediate. Families would not be punished instantly. There would be investigation, delay, time to disappear. Cleomenes resists at first. Defection is worse than death in Spartan code. Honor is identity. To abandon Sparta is to erase oneself. But Melina speaks not of rebellion, but of survival. "Sparta made you," she says quietly, "but it does not own what you choose to become." The decision takes months, but attachment wins where conditioning fails. Cleomenes secures assignment to an embassy bound for Athens ironically, the city Melina lost years ago. Arrangements are made through quiet channels, helot guides bribed, servant routes mapped, children prepared. The night they leave, Sparta sleeps unaware. No alarms. No pursuit yet. They travel through mountain paths helots know better than their masters. Each step away from the city feels unreal, like walking out of a myth rather than a prison. When they cross the boundary into Athenian territory days later, Cleomenes stops not from fear, but from realization. For the first time in his life, he stands somewhere Sparta's laws do not reach. Years later, historians would debate whether their escape symbolized Sparta's flaw, that even the most rigid social engineering could not extinguish human attachment. Melina lived long enough to see her children grow outside the agoge, outside the machine. Cleomenes never fully shed Spartan hardness, but he chose life over glory, family over honor. And that choice, unthinkable in Sparta, became their final act of defiance. Because in the end, Sparta did not lose her through battle, it lost her through survival. And sometimes, living beyond a system's reach is the greatest rebellion history can record.